Hi, everybody. Karen Roby and Daphne Leprince-Ringuet for ZDNet talking today about Brexit and its effect on the tech industry in general. Daphne, I know you've put together a really great cheat sheet here for us at ZDNet and Tech Republic just about Brexit, the things that we need to know. Finally, some movement here. So talk a little bit about where all of this stands.
So the big news, I guess, the big latest news about Brexit is that Brexit has happened. It's happened on the 31st of January 2020. So that's a bit of a delay compared to the original date for Brexit, which was the 29th of March 2020. The date was delayed a few times because Parliament couldn't reach a consensus on how to get out of the EU exactly. And the main sort of change that has enabled Brexit to happen was that the Prime Minister changed. Prime Minister Theresa May stepped down and was replaced by Boris Johnson, who historically has been more vocal about Brexit, more determined in a way to, as in his own words, get Brexit done, deal or no deal. So Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. He sort of reshuffled Parliament by calling a general election. The Conservatives got a huge majority, so in that way, consensus was more easily reached. And a month ago, at the end of January 2020, the UK effectively left the EU. So that's sort of where we are at now and the biggest development in the past few months.
So Daphne, I guess this is somewhat of a broad or kind of loaded question here, but what happens now?
So what happens now actually is very little. What's actually happening is that the UK has started entering what is called an implementation period. So that's defined by the deal that Boris Johnson has managed to pass through Parliament, which is a withdrawal deal. And the withdrawal deal is the one that has said now the UK will be going through this implementation period that will last until the 31st of December, 2020. So less than a year, during which the UK is actually going to negotiate with the EU and try to reach a future agreement, a future relationship agreement. So that means reaching a new agreement on trade, on immigration, on security, on defense, on a lot of things. So the UK actually has quite a lot on its plate to reach this sort of new deal, which is the actual deal that it wants to strike at the end of 2020. In the meantime, as defined by the withdrawal agreement, the UK will be considered a third country. So it has technically left the EU, but it is still part of the single market and of the customs union. So that's quite important because that's what enables goods and services to actually move freely around the EU as if it were one country. And for the moment, the UK stays part of that bloc. And quite crucially, the withdrawal deal also protects the rights of of EU citizens living in the UK at the moment and of UK citizens living in the EU at the moment. So from that perspective, very little will change in the next few months while the UK sort of negotiates and tries to determine how the relationship with the EU will actually look like when Brexit effectively happens at the end of 2020.
Yeah, and Daphne, when we talk about specifically, tech firms, a lot of this just has to play out to see what's really going to happen and hard to predict. But, what are your thoughts in terms of how you see that tech firms will be impacted as we move down the line with this?
Well, so as I said, it's going to be defined by that future agreement that the UK is trying to strike with the EU, and we still have very little foresight on this. We don't really know what that agreement is going to look like. The only framework that we have is a political declaration that was published by the UK and the EU, but that's a framework. It's giving us guidelines, giving us an idea of what the agreement could look like, but it's not legally binding. The most important aspect probably for tech workers and for businesses that are not involved in tech is trade. So obviously, as I said, the UK is part of the single market and the customs union, and it's hoping to have sort of an agreement that goes beyond WTO trade terms, and that is more ambitious than WTO trade terms. It's hoping for a Canada-style deal, for example. So the EU currently has a deal with Canada by which most tariffs on goods are removed. But if the UK fails to reach an agreement, it will just have to trade on WTO terms, which could have sort of big consequences for tech firms and for businesses alike, and for traditional businesses alike. What is particularly relevant to tech firms will be what sort of agreement will be reached on data. So right now in the EU, data flows freely because all the member states meet the requirements of the GDPR, so that's the EU's regulation on data protection. So the moment that UK leaves the EU, it technically does not meet those GDPR requirements anymore. So it means that the EU will have to assess whether the UK standards are good enough to enable data to flow freely between the EU and the UK. That's called an adequacy assessment, and it's a decision that the EU has to make. In order to make sure that it is granted adequacy, the UK has already enshrined GDPR in its law. It has data protection laws that basically are the same as GDPR, but that doesn't mean that the EU will grant adequacy. And even if it does, it could take a long time. So for example, the US was granted adequacy by the EU, but that took 2.5 years. So that's quite a long time for businesses to be quite uncertain about how they will be allowed to trade with data and personal data. So for example, if a business has a customer base in the EU and is collecting data about its customers in the EU, or similarly, if it has employees in the EU and has employee information, employee payrolls happening in the EU, all of this will be impacted and it will slow down business activity quite significantly. So data adequacy is for sure one of the areas that tech businesses are keeping an eye on very closely at the moment.
All right, be interesting to see, Daphne, how this all plays out. Well, we appreciate your insights so much on this, and for everything you need to know about Brexit, its impact on the tech industry. Make sure you check out that cheat sheet on ZDNet and Tech Republic. Thanks for watching.